Today's report is sombre reading. Rising temperatures and changing weather could mean more crops fail, so food is scarce. Wildlife will face extinction. Rising sea levels could make water undrinkable, with flooding forcing millions from their homes. And the threat of war will rise as people fight for resources.
We have reasons to believe that if the world doesn't do anything about mitigating the emissions of greenhouse gases and the extent of climate change continues to increase, then the very social stability of human systems could be at stake.
But it seems this extreme weather isn't random. A UN report says this is climate change, and things are only going to get worse.
It will resume warming, but you don't really care whether it warms a degree in the next 60 years. It warmed a degree in the last 100 years. Life expectancy doubled.
A few degrees warming might be good.
The global warming is real and the humans are the cause.
Wait, global warming or climate change?
Manhattan.
I'm confused about the terminology here.
I agree with you that the climate is certainly changing and weird stuff is going on and we can't necessarily control it. The part that we can control, we have to look at that logically and rationally and not emotionally. And I think that's been very problematic.
It's almost like a religion.
And it is a religion. It is incredibly dogmatic. And if you disagree with it, people like Tim Cook say you should be thrown in prison.
Hello and welcome to the Great Climate Debate Podcast. My name is Jeffrey DeSena, and I have found myself in a position of insatiable curiosity about an issue that has been described as the apocalypse, an existential threat, the greatest challenge mankind has ever faced, but has also been described as a non-issue, a misinterpretation of the facts, and even a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese government. Yes, I'm talking about climate change. But it's not so much the physics, or the chemistry, or the thermodynamics that interests me. The science is certainly important, but what fascinates me is how the subject has infiltrated just about everything beyond science. If you've heard the terms climate change or global warming, chances are that it has been embedded in some political or ideological framework. Those on the left will exclaim, "We're doomed! We're headed for disaster! Big oil and the greedy capitalists are destroying the world," while those on the right will counter, "The climate has always been changing. Don't oppress me with your big government so-called solutions to this non-problem." With cooler heads, we can all recognize that both of these positions are ridiculous. The truth lies somewhere in the middle, but that middle is vast, and at least in the news media space, it seems to be largely unexplored. That's where I come in. The aim of this podcast is to explore that in-between, to dig into not only what the science has to say about what is really going on with Earth's atmosphere, but also how people deal with that information, how it is spread, how it is received, and what, if anything, we can or should do about it. For me, this is mostly an attempt to satisfy a curiosity that I think may be shared by others like you, dear listener, who want to know what is at the core of this whole climate change debate. What is the debate actually about? Who is participating? And why are they participating?
The one solution that people have on the left is cap the carbon, hurt our economy. That's not a good solution.
That's not the one solution. That's not also what it does.
All you guys will do. The only
How rich
thing
is Al Gore gotten
carbon.
selling carbon?
That's the Paris
private plane.
That's the Paris Agreement that we pulled out of, right?
But this is a real problem.
I just am tired of celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio, who owns a big yacht and a private jet to fly to the UN to give us all a lecture about how we need to do less.
This curiosity arises from the fact that I am not an expert on the subject. I have degrees in aerospace engineering and wind power, but my understanding of atmospherics is rudimentary at best. When I look at the data presented on an IPCC report or a news article or a documentary, I have very little ability to analyze the validity of these data. How do I know that the graph of global mean temperatures is accurate? How do I know that the visualization of polar sea ice reflects reality? How can I trust the numbers and analyses thrown at me every time I go down the internet rabbit hole? With ideologically motivated news reports,
The question is, what impact does CO2 have on the weather? What impact does CO2 have on climate change? And that is where you look at the geologic record. We've had warmer periods where it's been with lower CO2, and we've had colder periods with higher CO2. And you have to go way back for some of that. But the bottom line is hundreds of factors are dictating our climate. The medieval warm period was both southern and northern hemisphere. On my website, there's literally, it demolishes the idea of a hockey stick, new peer-reviewed studies. So the idea that Bill Nye is just going around saying CO2 is up, therefore global warming is dangerous, we should be concerned, it's not. It's not dangerous.
Last year saw the second smallest annual sea ice area on record. And these images from NASA show how quickly the ice is in fact disappearing.
We're losing vast tracts of Arctic sea ice in the summer. And just because it's wintertime doesn't mean that you can point to sea ice in the winter and say climate change is not happening. That's just gobbledygook.
Gobbledygook versus science. You be the judge.
And research dependent on their funding sources.
Well, here's the problem. Who gives you the research funding? If you do a grant proposal that says, here's an alternative that might work, they will shut it down because those agencies don't want the blowback of some senator saying, how dare you fund this research that says this is a valid alternative.
We have to be skeptical of everything. But if we're too skeptical, we'll never put together the information we need to make a decision on what to do. So what should we do? Do we ignore all of it and go about our day as we always have, simply react to the nearest issue in our lives? If the alarmists are right, we can't afford to go about business as usual.
Scientific models predict most of Miami Beach could be underwater by the end of the century.
A new study by UCLA says that global warming could make the current drought last for a century.
Long before the devastation in California, scientists had built a strong case linking a changing climate to more wildfires. A lot more.
The rapid increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere has warmed the planet at an alarming rate.
It's happened before, and it's happening again, right now.
It's not a question of will sea level rise a large amount. It's only a question of how fast that will occur.
But is that the whole story? Can we entirely ignore the climate change skeptics because we believe that they're all bought and paid for by the fossil fuel industry? Or are their objectives motivated by something else? Genuine skepticism or legitimate concerns about the energy security and well-being of mankind?
I discovered that maybe it's not as bad as it's made out to be. And so now I'm in the camp of, we have some global warming, no doubt about it, but it may not be as bad as we originally thought because there are other contributing factors.
There have now been several major ice core surveys. Every one of them shows the same thing. The temperature rises or falls, and then, after a few hundred years, carbon dioxide follows.
So obviously, carbon dioxide is not the cause of that warming.
Many senior climate scientists say the actual scientific basis for the theory is crumbling.
The near-universal official adoption of a pseudo-scientific dogma no less doctrinaire and no less potentially harmful than eugenics or Lysenkoism, the fatal attenuation of the quantitative as well as of the moral sense, the replacement of logic and the scientific method in schools worldwide by the crude and shameless subjection of innocent schoolchildren to the half-witted environmentalist propaganda. I accuse Al Gore, the United Nations Framework Convention, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, of overstating the likely future warming of the Earth, the costs and consequences of such warming, and the imagined and imaginary benefits of abating it, while understating the costs of abatement. I accuse the IPCC of having falsely claimed in its 1990 first assessment report that it had substantial confidence in its then prediction of near-term global warming, which has proven since then to be double the observed warming rate.
So the people that have the money, and I'm jealous of the Vice President, Gore. I am jealous he came up with a scam before I did. With the greatest respect, ma'am, it's the greatest fraud that's been perpetrated on mankind this century.
For those of us who aren't set on dedicating the next few years of our lives to studying atmospheric physics, we're going to have to figure out whom to trust. I've been inclined to trust the popular narrative, but as I've dug more, I've realized that I don't actually know what the science really says or what the objections are. Because I, probably like most of you, have gotten most of my information from popular media. I don't actually know any climate scientists. I haven't heard their expertise, their motivation, their process of investigation. For that reason, I aim to focus the first few interviews on scientists who have spent their time researching the atmosphere and how it is changing. I aim to tease out not only what they have been studying and what their research has found, but also what motivates them to conduct the research in the first place. What is their story? What are they trying to accomplish? What is it like to be a climate scientist? We often talk about this impersonal science that gives us the answers to the mysteries of the universe. But this science is conducted by real human beings, real live scientists. Ideally, the process, the scientific method, works regardless of the biases, foibles, and misdirections of those scientists. But I think it's useful to understand the humans that operate within this system of science. This is to be a forum for rational, respectful, and productive conversation. Join me as we explore a topic that is probably not the apocalypse, but is also probably not irrelevant. This is the Great Climate Debate Podcast. Thank you for listening.